1.2 demo, basic introduction. Today I want to go through a little bit of file setup, starting a new file, creating a workspace that will be perhaps more usable, looking into customization of the workspace, and then getting into practice worksheets that will go through selection tools, and then basic keyboard shortcuts, copy, paste, paste in place, alt click drag to copy, duplicate, adding to a selection, rotating, scaling, deleting, undoing, and redoing. We'll also get into grouping and locking a selection, and we'll end with a little drawing of a face. So the first thing I want you to see here is just starting a new file. If you create a new file, you have some options here that you can set up. In this particular case, most files I tend to set up at an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. That's a standard piece of printer paper. In this case, though, it's 11 wide by 8.5 tall. It's set to the unit of inches. It only has one artboard. There's no bleed. The color mode is red, green, blue, RGB. Raster effects are at 300, and the preview mode is at default. So if you were to actually set up a file for yourself and you're just going to do some basic designing, this would be a setup that I would recommend. And then you would just end up hitting create. Once you hit create, it opens up your application, and you can kind of see the basic size. 8.5 by 11 is the artboard. That's the white rectangle that you're seeing behind there. Now you can see here as well this double arrow that's on the character palette. You'll see this in a lot of different menus that pop out in these toolboxes. But if I just click on that once, it actually pushes that menu over to the right. When working at different design firms or between computers, sometimes the setup in Illustrator will be a little bit different. So if you go up to the top menu, you can come up to Window and then Workspace. And what I tend to like to work in is Essentials Classic. That's what I was basically trained on, and that's what I know best. In this actual setup, you have access to a lot of the tools, and so there's a lot of stuff that's just available that you can actually use without having to do too much work to find it. So that's the basic setup. Also, you can notice like any of these toolbars, you can actually click and drag. When you want to put it back into place, you can just put it next to the side of the window, and if it highlights blue, then you can put it there. You can also move any of these little toolboxes around within the application, and I'd basically move it around until it actually fits the space so that you can design the best that you can. If you ever make an adjustment that you don't really like, you can always go back up to Window, Workspace, and then for this particular setup, you can hit Reset Essentials Classic. And so when you do that, it kind of resets everything to normal again. So I'm going to go ahead and close this untitled file. I'm not going to use it. I'm going to go File, Open Recent, and I'm going to get into our Computer Arts exercise 1.2. And you'll see this one is, instead of having a photograph in the back of the actual file, this will actually have all of the type and objects still editable. So it's not going to be a photograph, so you can actually like get into this stuff and move it around. If I go into outline mode, which is Control Y, you can actually see all of like the basic skeletons of the drawing and the type. Command plus. I'm just doing a 2-finger scroll around on the artboard. Control 0 will fill the entire image within the window, and then Control Y will get me back out of outlines and back into normal view. Outlines is a great way to actually look and see, if you have some issue with your drawing. It's a great way to kind of go into almost like X-ray vision to look at your drawing with a little bit more specificity. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in. I'm going to use my spacebar hand grab and orient myself to the first item here. And even if I double click on this, since these are actual text boxes here, I can actually add into that name text box and add my name in. So I'm going to go Patrick Bulk. I'll go into the date. Today is the 14th. Tomorrow will be the 15th. So 08, 15, 23. And the period, this is period 0. So that's considered done. I can hit my selection tool. Sometimes I always go back to my selection tool just to kind of like get back to just a basis of or a beginning point. Spacebar hand grab, and I'm going to move over. So number 2, use the selection tool hotkey V to arrange the circles in a clover shape. Change the fill color to green. After arranging circles, use the direct selection tool A to reposition some anchor points on each leaf. So first things first, let's go ahead and use the selection tool to arrange the circles. So if I was in my direct selection tool, I wanted to go to my selection tool. That would be hotkey V. And by just clicking on the object, you'll notice the bounding box shows up around it. That means that we can actually edit or modify the image. So I'm going to click this, and I'm going to kind of create like a clover shape. So I don't know, something like that. And then I can take the stem, maybe put it something like this. It's kind of clover-like. Maybe I put this bigger circle up here. It seems to kind of look a little nicer. Okay. Change the fill color to green. So if you click and drag over all of those objects, you'll select them all. It's called adding to a selection. I can go to my swatches palette and I can change that to green. Got all kinds of different greens you can choose. So the fill color is now green. You can see that over here as well. After arranging, use the direct selection tool A to reposition some anchor points on each leaf. And so I can now go to my direct selection tool, and if I click on the circle, I can now click on specific anchor points and I can move them around. And so what we're going to do here is just kind of maybe flatten out some of these arcs. Make the leaves a little less circular. Maybe makes it a little bit more shamrock looking. And we'll consider that done. So again, selection tool, you can move the object around. Direct selection tool, you can actually get in and modify the anchors. Notice that the anchor that you're going to modify, it goes solid, whereas the ones that you are not going to modify, they remain white. You can also pull on these handles with the direct selection tool, and that'll kind of change the pitch of the line. Spacebar hand grab, let's move on. Use the star tool to draw a yellow star with 7 tips in the topmost cell below. Use Control C to copy the star. Use Control V to paste the star. Place the second star in the second cell, then change its fill color to pink. Scale and rotate the second star to fit the second cell. So let's first find our star tool. In our Essentials Classic, you can see the star tool is right over here. Again, it doesn't have a hotkey, so I can just click on that. If you click and hold, you can see what other tools are hidden underneath the star tool. So I'm going to click it and hold. Notice that right now this is triangular, so if I want to add more points, and the prompt above says to make 7, so right now I'm at 3, so that's 4, 5, 6, 7, so there's a 7-pointed star. And I want you to see there's some functions here as well with both the Control and also the Alt, you can actually change the kind of spikiness of the star, or kind of like more of the kind of flatness or roundness of the star. Again, Alt and Control will change this, and you basically just hold it and then scroll your mouse out or scroll it towards the center, and you'll get these different effects. Okay, I'm not quite sure which one controls which, Control or Alt, but go ahead and experiment with that. So I got my star, and I'm going to make it yellow. Then use Control C to copy the star. So Control C, Control V. So here we go. I'm going to select it with my selection tool. Control C, Control V. It's now, I have a copy of it. Place the second star in the second cell, then change its fill color to pink. So we can just pick a pink color over here in our swatches palette. Scale and rotate the second star to fit the second cell. So in order to scale the star, we can just pull on the bounding box from any of the four corners, or even from the middle anchor points, or these bounding points in the bounding box. What I tend to do if I want to maintain the same proportions is I'll hold Shift, click, and drag. And that basically just makes sure that it doesn't distort the image. Now, you notice if you put your mouse towards the corner of the bounding box, you actually get a rotate arrow. And so you can click and drag and be able to rotate that star. Another great way to scale, so if you just hold Shift and pull on the corner, it does an even scale or conform scale. You can also hold Shift and Option, and it will scale from the center evenly. That's a nice way to scale an object that you want to keep symmetrical. I tend to use Option and Shift, or on a PC it might be Alt and Shift. I'm not sure though. I'll have to double check that when I'm in class. So that's done. Spacebar hand grab. Let me put my swatches away. All right. Use the polygon tool to draw a triangle. Copy the triangle using Control C, then paste it in place using Control F. So then instead of Control V, we're going to use Control F. All right, and then scale the triangle down. Make both triangles with no fill and a black stroke. So first, let's get our polygon tool. It's probably going to be underneath the star. You can see it right there. We're going to make a triangle. So if I click and drag, right now it's a pentagon, so I hit the down arrow, goes to a square, goes to a triangle. Notice also if I hold Shift while I scale this out, it creates a flat bottom on the triangle. And so I'm going to go ahead and just make that triangle. Oops. Let's try that again. I'm going to hold Shift, click, and drag. I'm going to let go of my mouse, and then I'll let go of Shift, and it'll stay in place there. I can now use my selection tool. I can place or move that triangle within the composition. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy, so that's Control C, and then I'm going to paste in place, which is Control F. Now if you notice, it doesn't look like anything really changed here, but you'll something that's going to be revealed is that once we scale this triangle that's selected up, there's going to be a triangle that's bigger, and then a triangle that's like centered on it underneath it. So I'm going to go ahead and use Alt and Shift, click and drag from that bottom right hand corner. I'm going to let go of the mouse, let go of Alt and Shift, and then I'm going to go to outline view really quickly just so you guys can see this. So I go to outline, you can see that there's two lines there, two triangles, and one sitting on top of the other one. I go back out of outline view. I'm going to click and drag over both of those triangles. You can see the blue line kind of showing up there. I'm going to double click on my fill, and I can pull that color all the way down into black. Hit OK. And then I can transfer fill to stroke. And now I have two triangles. They're aligned concentrically. The main reason we use paste in place is typically when you want to put something right on top of another thing and then have them relate to each other symmetrically. So Control F can be a very, very useful keyboard shortcut. Spacebar to hand grab, let's move on. Draw a circle using, I'll draw a circle and then use Alt click drag to make a copy of the original circle. Then use Control D to duplicate the circle and distance. Select the row of circles, use the Alt click drag to copy another row, and then use Control D to duplicate circles till they fill the cell. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to fill this whole cell with a bunch of circles. So let's go ahead and go to our circle, our ellipse tool. I'm going to use Option Shift. I'm going to click and drag it just so it's nice and concentric from that center point. I'm going to let go of the mouse. I'm going to hit Shift X so it goes to fill. I'm going to go ahead and get my selection tool, Hotkey V. And then we're going to use what's called the Alt click drag. So in this case, you hold down Alt, you click, and you drag the shape. And what I like to do too, just so it stays in a straight line, is I'll hold Shift and it'll just keep it straight with the other circle that I'm dragging it from. Then I'll let go of the mouse, let go of my keyboard shortcuts, and then before I touch anything else, this is kind of the special move, I'll go Command D, and you'll see it actually duplicated the circle to the right. It's like the same move, it basically duplicated again. And I can do it again, and again, and again, and again, and again, until it fills up that whole space. So basically I took this, I Alt click, dragged it over here, and then I Command D, 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 all those circles there. So it's a great way to kind of like build a row of circles. Then I can click and drag over all of those circles. I can also have one selected and hold Shift and slowly add to the selection. That's kind of a nice way to actually add to a selection. And then what I'm going to do again is I'm going to hold down my Alt key. You can see like the double arrow shows up. I'm going to click and drag down, and I'll hold Shift, let go of the mouse, let go of Option and Shift, and then I'm going to duplicate this going down, which will be Control D, 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 oops, I don't know what happened there, D, 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 D. So when you saw that pink triangle show up, and that wasn't something I wanted to do, I went Control Z to get out of that and got back to my duplicating those circles. All right, so that's the duplicating function and also adding to selections and using Shift to kind of copy an object in 90-degree orientation. So now we'll go on to number 6. So use the selection tool in conjunction with Shift to add to a selection. Select and make all the stars blue, the circles green, and the pentagons red. So if I click this circle, I can hold down Shift and click that circle, this circle, this circle. In the last little exercise, we actually did this. So basically holding Shift and clicking, you can add to a selection. So we're going to make all our circles green. Go in here. You can also use your swatches palette over here if you want a different green. Select and make all stars blue. So I can click, hold Shift, click, click, holding Shift the whole time. All stars will be blue. And then pentagons will be red. There we go. So that's the process by which you add to a selection. Number 7, select and rotate the sad mouth to make the image a happy face. And so one of the things you'll notice is, like, if you try to click on the face there, you can't move it, and that's because the selection is locked. Can't move the nose, can't move the face, can't move the eyes. So that's a Command 2 basically locks things. We're going to see that in the next exercise. But you'll see if I click on the mouth is actually not locked, and so I can modify it. And so what I need to do is I need to just rotate this. And so you can see if I put my mouse to the corner of the bounding box, that little arrow shows up. I can click and drag. And now I have a smiley face. If you want, you can click and drag it down. Good to go. So that's basic introduction to an object that's locked, and then also how to rotate an object. Select the text box. So first we're going to select the text box. We'll use Control 2. So we're basically going to lock all the text to lock the selection. Then we'll change each circle to a different color. So I'm selecting the text box, and I'm going to go Control 2. Now the text is no longer something that is in front of the circles or is getting in the way of me selecting the circles. So now I can select the circle and I can change their colors. There we go. All right, number 9. Use the selection tool and shift to add selections. So select the triangles of similar colors. When all of a color are selected, use Control G to group them. And grouping is a kind of neat way to keep things that are complicated organized by just keeping them together so they don't get misaligned. So in this case, we're kind of using this just to learn how to group objects. But you'll find as you design more complicated pieces, you will want to learn how to group things. So the first is an old thing that we've learned already, to add to a selection. So I have my selection tool. I'm going to click on this gray triangle type shape. I'm going to add all the grays to it. And once I have them all selected, I'm going to use Control G. Now you'll notice if I click on this triangle, all of the other ones moves because they're grouped together, which is a kind of neat thing. Okay, let's go ahead and group all the reds. They're all selected. I can kind of test move them, and then I'm going to go Control G. So now all the grays are separate and part of a group. Now all the reds are separate and part of a group. And so the last thing is to select all the greens and then Control G. So now I have 3 groups. I have a group of green triangles, I've got a group of red triangles, and I've got a group of gray triangles. So that's basically using the add to selection function through Shift and then using Control G to group. So the last thing is getting into just like a fun thing. So I'm not going to do a demo of that just because I think you guys should design your own face without inspiration from me. But basically it's draw a face using 10 shapes and 3 colors. So you can use any of your shapes in the shapes kind of tools and then any of the colors that you have in your palettes. One of the things you'll notice is we haven't really talked too much about arrangement, so putting something in front of or behind. So you probably want to start with the background of the face so that all the shapes you put on top will stay on top. All right, that's the end of this demo. We'll see you guys in class.